Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1952. We're going to be taking a look at Les Paul and Mary Ford, and they're going to be playing through There's No Place Like Home with a few ad-libs thrown in. So let's see how these two get on.
So, Mary, if you'll follow me, we'll do it, all right?
I'll try.
Will you follow me? All right. Now, he wrote another song that we'd like to do for you.
I got a little wife, she's the joy of my life. There's no place like home. I got a little house that I call my own. There's no place like home. I come home at night from a hard day's work, meet 6, 7 kids with a face full of dirt. And they all go to sleep on the bosom of my shirt. There's no place like home. Home, sweet, sweet home. There's no place like home. When the relatives come to visit you, there's no place like home. They'll bring their trunks and stick like glue. There's no place like. They'll take all the very best beds you've got, and you can sleep out in a broken old cot with a brother-in-law who's about half shot. There's no place like home. Home, sweet, sweet home. There's no place like home.
I'm just going to jump in here. A lot of people will think that, Les Paul was the master of multi-tracking and maybe it's fake and she's not really playing it, but she absolutely is playing everything here. And the thing about Mary Ford's playing, in that last section, by the way, where Les is playing and then hits the guitar in order to slide up by 1 fret, it's interesting because Les leaves a little bit too much time between picking the strings so that you can't really hear the slide when he does it. And then Mary, when she does it, makes sure that she slides up by that fret when she's still got some sustain and resonance coming from those strings. So it's interesting the way that they both do that, and Mary has obviously done that intentionally. So Mary Ford was more than just a competent guitar player, and when you do play yourself and you've been playing for a while, there are telltale signs as to where her ability level is. And the first thing that is the giveaway is at 43 seconds, where she starts to play and she subconsciously knows exactly where the volume knob is on the Gibson Les Paul and just tweaks it just to give herself a little bit more volume. And these are the kind of things that, especially when you just start playing, you'd have to look to see where the volume knob is. You wouldn't be able to find it instantly. And just the way that she cradles that volume, you can tell she knows exactly where that is and will be used to just adjusting the volume for tonal differences in her playing when she is maybe playing a particular lead section or rhythm. One thing that you cannot fake is being comfortable with the guitar and being at ease when you're playing, and Mary Ford certainly is that throughout this whole performance. Interestingly, at 1 minute and 23, when she goes to play the same harmonics that Les has just played, she misses the high E harmonic and just hits the open string because she was ever so slightly off, and that would have annoyed her so much inside because she's at the ability level where she can do that, and it's one of those things that maybe making the point later in the performance with that slide upper fret. It's just making up for that missed harmonic in the beginning. But these are tiny little details that people probably wouldn't notice unless they play themselves. Another thing, in the beginning, when Mary starts to tune up her guitar and Les does the same thing, Les just bends his B string to try and throw Mary off. And that's the thing about this performance, is the rapport between Mary and Les and the way that they're performing, and you get a sense of the relationship between them through the performance. And again, it's another example of back in the day where entertainment also had a hell of a lot of talent involved with it. So even though this is an entertaining segment, and this would have been from their show, which was from the early 50s through to 1960, and it was just about 5 minutes in length, so they had time to go through one longer piece or a couple of songs if they wanted to, if they shortened them down. And having the amount of talent within this particular performance might have flown under the radar because it's so entertaining. Another thing is that Les Paul was involved in every single aspect of the TV show and the music and recording and his guitars and inventions. He did so many different things, and I do have a designated video on Les Paul if you want to check that out. But let's watch the rest of the performance.
When the baby cries out in the middle of the night, there's no place like home. You search for medicine without any light, there's no place like home. You jump out of bed on an upturned tack, come a slide down the stairs in the middle of your back, and your wife hollers out, oh, hurry up, Jack, their name is Les. There's no place like home. Sweet, sweet home. There's no place like home. Sweet, sweet with your wife's cold feet in the middle of your back, there's no place like home.
And there we have it. There are a few lines that Les does throw in there that are slightly more technically advanced. At 4 minutes and 18, there's a run of 6 notes that's alternate picked, and then he does another 6-note run, and it's not copied exactly by Mary, but she is supplying a harmony line behind, so it's well arranged in order to achieve that similar sound. Obviously, people that do play guitar will know that Les Paul, as a guitarist, would have been practicing techniques for multiple hours every day for multiple years, and it's not the kind of technique that you can instantly pick up. So Mary Ford just the way that she stays with Les throughout this performance shows that she would have spent a hell of a lot of time practicing as well on that fretboard. The very last passage that Les goes through, where he starts to go a little bit crazy on the guitar, obviously he knows that for the show they've got a limit of about 5 minutes where they have to fit everything in. So he knows that he can go a bit crazy at the end because they're about to wrap up, and it just so happens that he does break a string. And when Mary then starts to copy what he was doing with the alternate picking sliding up and down the guitar, that gives away so much about her technique, because she's got such control and ability with alternate picking as she slides up and down the guitar. You can't pretend to do that if you haven't got great technique at alternate picking. So Mary is so on the ball there, and of course Les jumps over and puts his hand on the guitar because they know that they've got to wrap up at that time, and he knew that he could go for it because they were about to end the performance. But it's so well put together and has so many elements in there that would be off the cuff, but also tiny parts that you know they've probably played these lines before, and especially Mary will know Les very well and vice versa, so they can start to copy each other's playing. It's another thing that really does give away the ability level on the fretboard, is being able to do it in such a relaxed manner and keep the whole entertainment side of it. And that's what you got in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. Great players with great technical ability who could play with a smile and entertain you, to the point where the general public would have no idea of how long it takes to get to the level of ability of some of these entertainers. That's the difference, that back in the day, these kind of performances and the people doing them would be referred to as entertainers because they are entertaining, whereas nowadays they would be classed as top-level musicians and session players. I think back in the day, they certainly were spoilt as to the level of musicianship that you could just catch on a Saturday night on TV or on radio, because you had to be that good in order to get the airplay on radio shows and especially to get on TV. There was so much competition, so few channels, you had to be the best of the best, and these two certainly were. Just a quick word on Les Paul and Mary Ford, because they were huge in the early 50s. From 1950 to 1954, they had 16 top 10 hits, and just in the year 1951, they sold over 6 million albums, which was tied with Patti Page for that year in terms of sales. And in 1951, they sold more than Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, and the Andrews Sisters combined. So they had their own TV show, like I mentioned as well. You could not move for Les Paul and Mary Ford, just the impact they had on the music industry at that time. The biggest selling song of their career was Vaya con Dios, and that was released in 1953, which would have been the year before the particular performance we're watching here. The other thing is, having Les Paul involved, he knew everything inside out in terms of the production, which meant that they could employ close mic technique. And it was something that in the 50s, they used to stand back from the mics, whereas Mary got right into that microphone to give it a really personal touch and a different sound. Also, the multi-tracking of vocals, which meant that Mary could harmonize with herself. And a great example of that is How High the Moon, because you can hear that multi-tracking in action, and certainly in the 50s would have been something that wasn't the norm and gave Les Paul and Mary Ford's releases a totally different sound. Something that's a great indication of the input that Les Paul had and the vision that he had for recording was that when they bought their mansion, he carved out an echo chamber into a nearby mountain just to show he knew exactly the sound he wanted to get and how to get it. And just a quick word on Mary as well, where she started, because in the late 30s, 1939, she was still at school, aged 15, with her friend Millie Watson. They entered a talent contest and they won that, and I think that was judged by Judy Garland, a very young Judy Garland at that time, and they then had this dream of becoming musicians and having a career. So they left school and unfortunately ended up working in the cinema. So it didn't go to plan initially. But she stuck at it, and by 1943, she'd formed the Sunshine Girls, who would sing backing for Jimmy Wakely, and in 1944, they appeared with Jimmy in the movie I'm From Arkansas. So in 1945 is when Mary got introduced to Les Paul, and she was already a popular Western vocalist on the radio. At this time, she was known as Colleen Summers. Mary Ford would be her stage name when she started to play with Les Paul, because she didn't want to confuse the fans of the Western vocalist from the radio and what she was doing with Les Paul. So that's why she changed her stage name to Mary Ford. In 1946 is when she started to perform with Les and left the Sunshine Girls behind. In 1947, they became romantically involved, and 1948 was when they had their accident, when Mary was driving and skidded off the road, and they fell about 20 feet into a frozen creek, and that's what caused Les to have the shattered right elbow, which meant he took about a year and a half to get over that and recover. It meant that Mary was looking after him during all that time, and I think they had to fuse his elbow at a particular angle, and Les made sure that it was fused at such an angle that he could still play the guitar. They got married in 1949, and from 1950 onwards, like I mentioned, it wouldn't be an understatement to call them superstars, because they were outselling other superstars of that era. And in the 1950s, they still had their TV show, but unfortunately the times were changing in terms of the music, because the whole rock and roll thing was happening. So towards the late 50s, getting all the way up to 1960, the popularity declined, and in 1964 they actually divorced. But they were inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 1978. And this is a great example of that musical ability being rolled into entertainment as it was at the time, and just the rapport that they've got between them, but the ability level on the fretboard, because that's something that will fly under the radar with those people that don't play, but those that do will really appreciate the amount of ability on show here. But thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!